Balance of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew in New York, I'm Kaylee Lyons in D.C.
Tonight, signs of progress, new details emerging from the high-stakes nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran. Is there still a path for diplomacy as the military buildup intensifies? Also, what recent satellite images reveal about activity on the ground near Iranian nuclear facilities? Congressman and combat Marine Corps veteran Jake Auchincloss is standing by live.
And behind closed doors, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton facing questions under oath tonight from the Republican-led House Oversight Committee as part of its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Former President Bill Clinton will testify tomorrow as Democrats on the committee say President Trump should be next.
And on the clock, Anthropic facing a Friday deadline by the Pentagon to drop its guardrails on artificial intelligence for military use. What this showdown could mean for the future of AI and who controls it.
But we begin tonight with today's negotiations between the U.S. and Iran in Geneva. Iran's foreign minister describing the talks as one of the best and most serious rounds. And Oman, which is serving as mediator, saying significant progress was made and more technical negotiations will be held next week. This as the U.S. amasses the largest military buildup in the Middle East since 2003, and Iran reinforces key military and nuclear sites against possible future attacks. For the latest on that and more, we're joined now by Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove, who is here with me in our Washington, D.C. studio. So, Josh, we heard the president on Tuesday in the State of the Union say he does prefer diplomacy prevails here. Is this a sense that we actually are getting closer to a diplomatic resolution?
Markets are at least interpreting it as a slight pause or a little bit of air coming out of the balloon. We'll see. Trump likes to maintain, as you know, the sort of will he or won't he ambiguity around these things. We haven't heard from him directly on these talks, and we'll be watching that very closely. Remember, of course, that the Republican Party is of two minds here, right? Trump kind of has come up through an anti-interventionist wing, the vice president as well, that probably aren't super keen to get bogged down in a new conflict abroad. And so, you know, not that that's necessarily what's being considered, but that would be sort of the political backdrop for them. So as of now, basically from Trump's perspective, it's not clear that really anything has changed. He continues to give room for these talks to continue with, reportedly on a technical level next week. And then from there, we will see. It would suggest that would rule out any activity before those talks, but of course we don't know. And so it's just one case. Trump, of course, is trying to sort of quell this at a time when he's also dealing with other conflicts. A good piece on the terminal from our colleague Natalia Drozdiak and others today on how Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff can or are handling this. So I would encourage people to read that, but right now it's just wait and see mode, certainly for the press corps, but I suppose for all the world.
Hey, Josh, I'm in New York, so I have to ask you about the meeting today with Mayor Mamdani back in the Oval Office. The president had a big smile. Are these guys friends? What was this all about?
He really seems to like Mamdani. And so this was a surprise meeting, not on the schedule. Both the mayoral press corps and the White House press corps were surprised by this. Both the takeaway on housing, as well as the case of that Columbia student who seems to have been detained by ICE that Mamdani said that Trump told him would now be released. Now, the question is sort of twofold. Number one, the tangibles. Will this lead to specific housing projects being built or housing developments being built? And more broadly, Trump does tend to gravitate towards people that have star power or are, you know, popular right now. And so he seems to have been charmed from the moment he met Mamdani, and that just hasn't seemed to have gone away. So we'll see where it goes. But right now, I wish I had as much time with Donald Trump as Zoran Mamdani does. I would say that, Joe.
Yeah, they talk a lot,
yeah, for sure.
I guess. But Donald Trump won't be focused as much on New York tomorrow as he will be on Texas. He's traveling to Corpus Christi. And aside from the message that he is bringing there, as we see this kind of post-State of the Union tour that J.D. Vance is on today as well, I'm interested in the people who will be there with them, specifically Republican Senate candidates that have a primary coming up on Tuesday.
That's right. There's a three-way race. It looks like it will head to a runoff, given that dynamic right now between the current senator, John Cornyn, and a couple of challengers, including Attorney General Ken Paxton. This one's really interesting because Trump has declined to weigh in. He could probably end this tomorrow if he wanted to throw his weight behind Cornyn in particular. He hasn't. Wesley Hunt, Congressman Wesley Hunt, is the third member of that campaign, and so we'll see. Reportedly, all three will be there, which, I mean, it's, you know, so often often feels like a reality show presidency at times. This specifically feels like a dating show of sorts that we're going to see with them. So we'll see whether he does it. Trump has not given a sign. In fact, he said he's not interested in endorsing. So it looks like we'll get to Tuesday's vote without that. As I say, that race will probably go to a runoff. The Democratic primary, also very interesting, between State Representative James Tallarico and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. That one will be watched closely. Polls seem to signal that, in particular, a Paxton-Tallarico matchup, if it came to that, would be pretty competitive, and sort of back to 2018 when Beto O'Rourke challenged Ted Cruz and came within a few points. So is this Democrats finally getting the Texas breakthrough that they have long coveted and thrown a ton of money at? Or is it Lucy with the football all over again? We'll see. One final note, Tony Gonzalez, the embattled congressman, Trump has not addressed that, and nor have they responded to my queries all week about whether his endorsement of Mr. Gonzalez, Congressman Gonzalez, still stands. It seems like there's a chance, of course, that will come up this week as well, or tomorrow on his trip as well. So we'll be watching that closely.
We're all ears, Josh. Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove in Washington. Thank you. As we turn now to Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts, who serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He's also a combat Marine Corps veteran who served in Afghanistan and as well in Panama. Congressman, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. I'd like to start with what's happening or not happening when it comes to Iran. They meet to agree to meet again, and we're hearing reports of significant progress today in Geneva. Are you optimistic about what you're hearing, and do you still want to move forward with a War Powers Act?
Absolutely move forward with the War Powers resolution. The House of Representatives is teed up to vote on it next week. It's a bipartisan resolution that makes clear the constitutional imperative that the president has to come to Congress to make the case for any authorization for the use of military force. Otherwise, any military action against Iran would be illegal. If the president wants to engage in coercive diplomacy against Iran in order to prevent it from acquiring a nuclear weapon, ballistic missiles, or to continue funding of proxy terror forces, I think that's appropriate, and I support that coercive diplomacy. But if he thinks he's going to use American warplanes to conduct an aerial strike, he needs Congress's say-so.
Well, but would Congress's say-so, Congressman, put the pilots of those planes, those aboard the Navy vessels that have been amassed in the Middle East, in danger if Iran decides to do something preemptively because the U.S. has signaled via a War Powers resolution that military action is coming?
No, and this is a common straw man that's put forward about AUMFs, is that somehow they tilt your hand towards your enemy. An authorization for the use of military force is exactly that. It's an authorization to use military force. It is not an indication of the time, place, or manner by which that force is used. And Congress is perfectly capable of scoping an AUMF that says, here's what's allowed, here's what's not allowed. And we allowed the commander-in-chief appropriate discretion to conduct the military in such a way as to protect service members and to put effects on target.
I want to ask you about what's happening inside the Pentagon, not with Iran, but with regard to Anthropic, Congressman. This is an unprecedented moment we're at, and it could be certainly a precedent-setting one. By 5:01 p.m. tomorrow, Anthropic needs to get back to the Pentagon on a best and final offer about lowering guardrails for use of its AI in weapons, in military operations. It's already been used in the capture of Nicolas Maduro. This is a moral and ethical question that the Pentagon and companies like Anthropic have not been faced with before. What should be its answer?
My bipartisan legislation, the Deepfake Liability Act, which makes clear that AI bots and large language models do not have immunity from liability. Because here's what's plain. These are profit-seeking corporations, and they are always going to put their bottom line first. You know, OpenAI says, we're never going to do advertisements. They do advertisements. Anthropic says, we're not going to work with the Pentagon. They work with the Pentagon. I mean, it's as surely as night follows day, the companies are going to maximize shareholder value, which is why we have a system of torts, litigation, and liability that holds them accountable for harms. And what my bill would do is it would allow harmed parties to hold these corporations accountable for things like intimate privacy violations, cyber stalking, and bullying. You know, for example, another Pentagon contractor, Grok, Elon Musk's AI bot, was producing one deepfake image of child sexual abuse every 40 seconds for 11 straight days, and there's no liability for it. That's not the kind of world I want my kids growing up in.
Well, on this Anthropic question in particular, as it pertains to our defense, Congressman, we spoke about this with Greg Allen, who used to work on AI issues at the Pentagon, is now at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This is what he told us about this issue yesterday. Take a listen.
I'm sympathetic to the DoD in saying it needs flexibility in these contract terms. What I think is an unreasonable escalation is threatening to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk. That's what we do when we find out companies are secretly have Chinese or Russian ownership. Yeah. To take a domestic AI champion at a time when the White House is saying that the AI race with China is equivalent to the space race during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, you do not want to take one of the crown jewels of your industry and light it on fire over something like this.
So even if, Congressman, you do think there need to be guardrails and some degree of liability for these companies, do you agree with that general idea that we can't fall behind in this regard?
I agree that we want to outcompete the Chinese Communist Party in AI, in biotechnology, in batteries, in critical mineral exploration. Here's what I disagree with. I disagree when these tech companies come to Congress and they say, if you regulate us, we will fall behind China once and forever. That's nonsense. Look at what the Chinese do with their social media platforms. 90 minutes a day constrained for youth, only educational content. None of this attention fracking via video that we see with TikTok. Can you imagine the Chinese Communist Party allowing a United States social media platform to become the dominant source of news and information in China, the way we have with TikTok? So these corporations act as though they're digital empires, and that anything that the American taxpayer tries to do to hold them accountable to American interests is somehow undermining our competitive advantage. I think that's nonsense. I think what the U.S. government should do is focus on the basics: rule of law, education, workforce development, and not act as though common sense liability measures are somehow going to cause us to lose to the Chinese Communist Party.
Congressman Auchincloss, I flew up to New York from Washington today and saw a bunch of TSA workers who were in uniform and doing their jobs knowing that they were not getting paid. And I'd like to ask you about the duration, as you expect here, or maybe cannot predict, about this DHS shutdown. Are talks on ice? I know that Democrats and Republicans have found an impasse at demasking and judicial warrants. Should workers at DHS, like those in the TSA or FEMA, brace for weeks of this?
They shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have had to suffer a day of it, because this administration is insisting upon a false choice to the American public. They're saying you can either have TSA pre-check or you can have masked agents knocking on your door without a warrant. That's no bargain that a free people should ever accept, and the American public will not accept it. Democrats don't think that guns, badges, and masks are a good mix. We don't think that officers of the law should be able to conduct dragnet operations and intrude on people's personal property without warrants. And we do think that ICE should be reprioritized towards border security and towards deporting criminals. And 2/3 of Americans agree with us, and we're not going to back down on this.
All right, Congressman, we appreciate you joining us. Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts. Thank you. Now, the co-CEO of Netflix, Ted Sarandos, just left the White House moments ago, as Warner Brothers Discovery announces Paramount's offer to buy the company is a superior proposal to the one it signed with Netflix in December. For more, we turn now to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, who joins live from World Headquarters in New York. And Romaine, I feel like we've talked to you about this story every day for the last I don't know how long.
Well, we're going to talk about it for at least 4 more days, because effectively what happened today is the board at Warner Brothers Discovery basically deemed that the Paramount Skydance offer is, quote, superior. But however, they also pointed out that at least for right now, they favor the Netflix transaction. Now, what does this all mean? It basically puts into motion right now a 4-day time frame where Netflix has to respond in a formal manner, whether they're going to actually raise the offer or stand pat, whether they restructure the offer in one way or another. And there are a lot of questions about what Ted Sarandos really wants. The co-CEO spoke with Bloomberg last week. He was allegedly at the White House today. We don't know exactly what he said, but there are a lot of questions, not just about the financial terms of this deal, but of course some of the antitrust and political issues surrounding it, and just how much Netflix wants to fight for it. You see the shares kind of all over the map here. We should point out, Netflix shareholders as a whole have generally been against this deal. So if you saw them actually Netflix pull out, you could see Netflix shares pop. Paramount Skydance, of course, wants this. They just reported earnings and made it clear that adding Warner Brothers to their lineup, Warner Brothers Discovery, would be additive to their bottom line.
Pretty remarkable moment. As we pull out here, this is the big reveal. I'm sitting right next to Romaine at World. It's never happened before. How about that? I just snuck up on you. So one of the big stories of the late day here, but we were watching NVIDIA all day.
Yeah.
Following the earnings that you talked to us about after the bell yesterday. Yeah. In a visceral reaction to a 94% jump in profit, 73% jump in revenue. You sell that stock. That's weird. But it also kind of a testament, too, to the idea that there is a lot more going under the hood with regards to this AI trade, right? We kind of know what NVIDIA's growth rate is. The idea is that that's topping out. What people are doing is they're taking money and they're moving to other players in the AI space. I don't know if you can take a look at Dell shares, but they're actually rallying today, up about 10% in the after-hours trade after reporting earnings. Basically, they used to make computers, Joe. You remember Dell computers now? They've become a server company. They're saying they're going to have $50 billion in revenue from that. Keep in mind, that's like 50% of their sales. Remember, just a few years ago, this was a company in contraction, almost in decline, and AI has really saved them. And that's where a lot of the money is going to right now. People really looking for what's the next, maybe NVIDIA, if I can say that, if you will. And by the way, NVIDIA is not going anywhere. I mean, they're still up like 800% over the last few years. The pipeline to 28 or something, right? I mean, the back order is the story, Romaine.
Absolutely.
We'll have a lot more to talk about on this front. He's real. I can't believe it. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostic. We thank you so much. Coming up, the Clintons testifying before the House Oversight Committee over their connection to the Epstein files. We're going to bring you the latest details coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Again, we're not accusing Hillary Clinton of wrongdoing. We know that Jeffrey Epstein said many times in emails that he was the first person to raise money for the Clinton Initiative, the Clinton Foundation, that he solicited money at some of his properties for the Clinton Foundation. Again, that's not saying anything illegal, but there are a lot of questions pertaining to Secretary Clinton with respect to Epstein and his involvement in the Clinton Initiative and her relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Joe Matthew in New York, I'm Kaylee Lyons in Washington. And that was Republican Congressman James Comer, chair of the House Oversight Committee, earlier today, teeing up his expectations for the closed-door deposition of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton today, with her husband, former President Bill Clinton, set to face questioning from them tomorrow. Bloomberg's Megan Scully has been covering this story and is joining us live with the latest. So, Megan, obviously this is very high profile. We haven't seen a former president forced to testify to Congress like this. But have we actually learned anything new from Secretary Clinton's testimony specifically?
We have not yet, although I will say it's continuing to go on. It's been about 6 hours now. Wow. Some committee Democrats came out a few hours ago and said she's answering all questions, which leads me to believe she's not just pleading the fifth. And she put out a pretty defiant statement this morning where she really went after committee Republicans, essentially saying that they're looking in the wrong place, that if they're really serious about going after those involved in the Epstein sex trafficking ring, that they would be looking elsewhere. And she specifically said that they should call President Trump to testify.
Megan, I'm just curious what kind of a precedent we're setting here, regardless of what the Clintons say or what this leads to. Does this mean that a couple of years from now we're going to see former President Trump brought before Congress to testify, maybe Melania Trump, or should every president plan for this in their post-White House career?
We're certainly in some new terrain here, which is not new for, this political season. I certainly think that is a possibility. I also think that if Republicans lose the House, lose the U.S. House, which is, expected, the Democrats are expected to pick up the majority after the November midterms. And certainly if Democrats pick up the Senate, which is a bit more of a stretch, we could see more demands on Trump to come and testify on the Hill about Epstein and a host of other issues. We could see impeachments of Trump and certainly his cabinet officials. That's already been among, the talk on Capitol Hill, should, of course, the majorities change hands come November.
Megan, just quickly, we saw that the ranking member of the Oversight Committee, Robert Garcia, yesterday suggested that the DOJ was withholding specific files that mentioned President Trump. The DOJ then said anything that they had accidentally not released, they were going to do so. Do we have a sense of where that goes next and what is about to be made public?
It's certainly an ongoing fight, whether Trump is in these files and why they were held back from release by the Justice Department. It's unclear exactly what's going to happen next. Certainly, in order to comply with the law that Trump himself signed just several months ago, they need to release all documents that are not, raising national security concerns, and certainly those they can withhold the ones that to protect victims, but they cannot withhold them to just protect the rich and powerful men who were involved here. We should note that Trump and both Clintons have said that they have not been involved, and they've distanced themselves from Jeffrey Epstein for years, going back to his first conviction in 2009.
Megan, thanks for joining us. Bloomberg's Megan Scully in Washington. The other big story playing out in Washington today, as we just discussed with Congressman Auchincloss, the standoff between Anthropic and the Pentagon, escalating now ahead of a deadline tomorrow, a 5:01 p.m. deadline, after a Department of Defense spokesperson hardened the U.S. military's stance that the company not dictate any limits on its AI technology for military use. Anthropic has resisted the Pentagon's demands so far, emphasizing that its policies bar their models from being used for mass surveillance or for fully autonomous weapons. That's despite the DoD insisting it does not intend to use Anthropic's technology for those purposes. But where will things stand by this time tomorrow, when that Pentagon deadline is passed? Joining us from our Washington bureau with details, Bloomberg's Michael Shepard. Is this not looking good for Anthropic, Mike, and what would that mean for other AI models?
Well, Joe, that really is the question right now, and it is whether there will be any sort of attempt in the last moments to compromise. They have about 24 hours to step forward and accept what the Pentagon has really laid out as a hard line here. And publicly, the spokesman, Sean Parnell, said, look, it is the Pentagon's way or the highway, and that would include declaring the company a supply chain risk. That kind of a listing is something that we just heard Gregory Allen in his interview with you and Kayleigh earlier this week lay out as something that is a consequence reserved for companies that are doing business secretly with China and Russia, and it would essentially put Anthropic off limits to other defense contractors. And so it is a really heavy threat laid out against them. And it's also a signal to other defense contractors potentially that might want to defy the Pentagon in other areas of policy. The Pentagon is saying, hey, look, we want your technology and we will use it lawfully, and we do not need, nor do we wish to abide by any restrictions or conditions you might want to attach.
Well, CBS is just reporting in this headline just crossing the terminal that the Pentagon's chief technology officer has said the Pentagon made concessions to Anthropic. Good concessions is how they describe it. So I guess, is there somewhere where these two can meet in the middle, potentially, Mike?
Well, in a way, Kayleigh, the two sides have been talking past each other in sort of a pinky swear sort of way. They could just say, well, when you say lawful use of our technology, I guess that means you are accepting our terms of use. And likewise, for the Pentagon, they say, look, when we say lawful, we mean, yeah, we will abide by how you would like us to use the technology. Because what the Pentagon has said is we are not going to use your technology for mass surveillance of Americans domestically, and we do not intend to use it either for fully autonomous weaponry either. So it does seem that there is a little bit of talking past each other, and yet each has a stake in forging ahead. The Pentagon is trying to power ahead with its AI agenda. It is moving fast, and it really doesn't want companies, including Anthropic, standing in the way there.
All right. Bloomberg's Michael Shepard following this story for us ahead of that deadline tomorrow. Thank you so much. Coming up, talks between the U.S. and Iran over its nuclear program set to continue next week. We'll speak with a negotiator from the JCPOA agreement, Wendy Sherman, next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Kayleigh Lines in Washington, I'm Joe Matthew in New York. Talks between the U.S. and Iran continuing today in Geneva, as we've told you, with Iran saying the conversation progressed very intensely and very seriously, with days to go until President Trump's deadline for a deal. Remember, he said 10 or 15 days. The two countries started their third round of Omani-mediated discussions. Trump has threatened to strike Tehran unless its leaders agreed to an accord, sparking fears of a new Middle East war. And joining us now with the latest here at World Headquarters in New York is Bloomberg's Christina Ruffini, co-host of the new show Bloomberg This Weekend, which is literally the reason why I am in New York for this weekend. And congratulations. It's great to see
Thank you so much.
Finally happened.
We wanted the best of the best, so we made you come up. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm trying to keep good company. Tell me what's about to happen. You covered the State Department for years. We're told that we've never seen a collection of military hardware this large without it being used. Could it still be a ruse?
It's really hard to tell at this point. I'm getting a lot of mixed signals from a lot of different people. When I talk to Middle Eastern non-American diplomats, they are still concerned because the optics of it are pretty obvious, right? You don't move that hardware. You don't move all those resources, spend all that money into place unless you're planning on using them. And if you don't use them, you have to have a really, really good reason. This is where the rub is, because there are issues that the U.S. wants in this deal that Iran just simply cannot capitulate on, and vice versa. So there is a gulf between these two countries. Look, they talked for 6 hours today. They talked for a bunch. They had a break. Then they went to an Omani diplomatic residence and talked some more. The top lines out of these meetings are good. Both sides have said positive things. The talks didn't break down, but they didn't have a breakthrough either. And so I would say that doesn't make a 0% chance that these strikes don't go ahead.
Well, and when we know that technical talks are on the docket for next week, Christina, I wonder if, amid all the reporting and Trump himself acknowledging that he's considering doing something much more specific and contained in order to gain leverage to try to get Iran to agree to what the U.S. wants here. Is it possible that having technical talks on the books doesn't actually mean that we can rule out military action this weekend?
I would not rule out anything either way. I think it's a good sign. I think people are a little bit more positive today than they were yesterday, but that's exactly right. Technical talks are not high-level talks, are not principal talks. You know, this is the nitty-gritty. Now, normally, as Ambassador Sherman will talk to you about, this goes in a different order. Normally, you start with technical talks and work your way up from there. That's not how the Trump administration likes to do diplomacy. And look, sometimes that's really successful. Sometimes they can break through bureaucratic walls that have been there for so long because they don't play by the rules. But when you're dealing with a negotiation like this, when you're dealing with how many centrifuges can you have? How much can you enrich uranium up to this amount? How many ballistic missiles are we going to allow you to have? Is that even going to be on the table? Iran has said no. That requires a lot of bureaucratic technical talks. So to your point, I think that stick is still there. It's just a point of whether or not they feel like they've gotten far enough that they don't have to use it this weekend ahead of those talks. I would not rule it out completely.
Your weekends are going to change starting Saturday. All of our weekends are going to change.
Everyone will be watching, so everyone's weekends will change.
Well, that is actually true if they're smart. This is going to be on Bloomberg TV and radio. You start at 7 in the morning?
We do.
You could be worse than that.
7 to 10 on Saturdays and Sundays. One of the reasons I wanted to come to Bloomberg is because you guys have such a global audience, and especially on the weekends, there is space to really dig into these issues and talk with the incredible smart people who work here, but also folks who are authors and experts. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about sports. Anything that you talk about on the weekends, we're going to talk about on TV.
You, David Gura, Lisa Mateo.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to see all of this.
And you.
Clock, 7 a.m. Saturday. And I'll be there too, Kaylee. You should get up here while you can.
Kaylee, I'm going to make you come up too.
Look at the three of you.
Yeah, I'm suffering from a case of FOMO right now. Bloomberg's Christina Ruffini, thank you so much. And you can check out their new show, Bloomberg This Weekend, with Christina, David Gura, and Lisa Mateo, as Joe mentioned, Saturdays, Sundays, 7 a.m. Eastern, right here on Bloomberg TV and radio, as well as the Bloomberg Business app. But we want to get back to what we were just discussing with Christina beyond the show, and that is talks between the U.S. and Iran. And joining us now with her insight is Wendy Sherman, senior fellow at Harvard's Belfer Center and former deputy secretary of state in the Biden administration. She was also the lead U.S. negotiator of the JCPOA Iran nuclear deal back in 2015. Wendy, thank you so much for being with us. When we think about the idea that this administration has not been shy about building up its posture in the Middle East, sending more and more military assets into the region. President Trump openly talking about the threat of doing a strike in advance to try to extract more concessions from Iran. You know how Iran negotiates. Is that going to work?
Well, I think Christina gave a very good summary of where we are, which is none of us really knows what's going to happen here. It's very rare to set the theater in the way the president has and then not use those military resources. So I think that makes us all very concerned that indeed there could be a strike this weekend. That said, there are several things that are on the table for next week, not only ostensibly these technical talks in Vienna, which will happen while the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors, the IAEA, led by Rafael Grossi, who was part of the talks today, who will really do the verification and monitoring of any deal that would be done. That Board of Governors meets next week in Vienna. We also know that there's going to be likely a war powers resolution on the floor in the United States Congress because the Congress has not been briefed. President Trump has not made the case for why he would take military action. What's the objective? What's the strategy? And once you start these things, as we've seen in the multiple reports that General Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, is nervous about the risks that are part of all of this. Once you start a strike, I can tell you, Iran, because it believes very strongly in its position, is going to react, is going to attack, and we may be in an escalatory cycle that we no longer can control. So it's a very difficult time. I hope that the reports out of the negotiations today, that positive things happen, are real, that it's true, that we're actually going to have a negotiating process, that there will be technical talks. But the reality is, we don't know.
Ambassador, it's great to see you. I want to hear more from you on the risks that you're referring to, because Bloomberg's done some great reporting today based on satellite imagery of the nuclear sites inside Iran, suggesting the Pentagon would confront an adversary focused on preserving these nuclear capabilities. In fact, showing Iranian engineers clearing debris at facilities damaged during last June's conflict with the U.S., reinforcing, hardening some key sites, and suggesting this is going to be a lot more difficult than President Trump and some others have thought or suggested. How do you interpret what's happening on the ground right now in Iran?
Well, it's very interesting. We've heard very different things out of the administration. We heard Witkoff, the negotiator, saying that we were 1 week away for them having enough enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon. We've heard Secretary Rubio say that indeed they aren't enriching, but are trying to regain their capacity to do so. Those are two very different things. So we need to get the facts straight. And indeed, the President of the United States said and repeated in the State of the Union this week that he had indeed obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities. That clearly is not the case. That's why we are where we are. Iran also has missile capabilities. We have military all over the region. We have American citizens all over the region, and our partners, our allies could be attacked as well. And as you know well, Kaylee and Joe, oil prices are very much at stake here. Iran could close the Strait of Hormuz. That would send oil sky high in terms of price. We've seen the price down today. That's to say to Iran, I think, you're not going to make much out of this. You should be careful here as well. This is a very tense situation. I'm hoping diplomacy works, but one can't rule out a strike.
Well, and how does Israel factor in here, Wendy? We have seen reports that the White House is considering having Israel strike first and the U.S. joining later. Is it possible that Netanyahu decides to act unilaterally if he thinks that President Trump is dragging his feet too much? What role does that play?
Very good point. I think, in fact, the United States, some in the administration would like Israel to go first, and then we be dragged into it so that the president doesn't have to take the initiative and won't be, in fact, in some ways responsible for what might come. But that's, in my view, a fool's errand, because we will be dragged into it. We will be responsible. It will be our military assets that are used, and it will be our Americans who will die in this process, along with more Iranians. And as you may recall, some of this started not over nuclear, but because the president rightly was just astonished and horrified at the number of deaths when protesters took to the streets in Iran. And he said, we would basically come and help you. We haven't really done that. Taking a military strike, I think, is not going to help the protesters. I don't think we have the capacity to do everything we need to do. And as Secretary Rubio said himself in testifying in front of Congress, if we decapitated the regime, no one knows what would come next. In my view, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is really the hardline military of Iran, would take control of Iran, and we might be in even a worse position than we are now.
Ambassador, we have breaking news by way of the Pentagon and the AI company Anthropic, which is something we've been covering quite a bit lately, and we've been focused on this hour. This is something that I'm reading with you listening for the first time, a statement from the man behind Anthropic, Dario Amodei, who had a meeting with the Pentagon about removing potentially guardrails on the use of his AI technology for military purposes. Anthropic, as we've reported, has a 5:01 p.m. deadline to respond to what was framed as a best and final offer by the Pentagon. It seems we may have just gotten their answer, a statement from Amodei that reads in part, in a narrow set of cases, we believe AI can undermine rather than defend democratic values. He goes on to say, these threats that are referred to by the Defense Department do not change our position. We cannot in good conscience accede to their request, referring to that request that they lower guardrails and let the Pentagon decide how AI is used. And I do want to note that the DOD has said that it does not intend to use AI for mass surveillance or for human-free weapons. How important is the precedent that Anthropic appears to be setting?
I think it's incredibly important. One of the things I did as Deputy Secretary was lead the strategic stability dialogue with Russia, both in the lead up to their horrifying invasion of a sovereign country, Ukraine. But before that, before we knew that Putin was going to do that, we were actually having very serious discussions about just these issues when it comes to AI and how it was going to change warfare and what guardrails had to be put in place. We weren't successful because of the invasion of Ukraine, but everyone understood this was a very serious issue. Were humans going to be involved in making military decisions? Were we really going to turn ourselves over to a machine for the life and death, not only of our citizens, our country, but of the world? So I think Anthropic is taking a very important position here and setting guardrails in place that are quite critical.
Well,
we have to be very careful about the use of AI.
Yeah, the Pentagon has threatened to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk if it does not find a deal here, and we will let you know if that's the response from the DOD. Wendy Sherman, former Deputy Secretary of State in the Biden administration. She's senior fellow at Harvard's Belfer Center. We thank you, Ambassador. Coming up, the countdown to Texas. President Trump expected to head there tomorrow, days ahead of the blockbuster Senate primary race. Could there be a last-minute endorsement? Our political panel standing by to talk about it next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Kaylee Lines in Washington. I'm Joe Matthew at World Headquarters in New York as we bring you breaking news from Anthropic and a response to what was framed as a last and final offer, a best and final by the Pentagon. An answer was not due to the close of business tomorrow, but Dario Amodei of Anthropic is out with a statement on discussions with the Department of War, suggesting that despite threats to cut off ties with Anthropic and, in fact, designate the company as a supply chain risk, he says the company is not changing its position. Quote, we cannot in good conscience accede to their request, remembering that Anthropic had made clear that it did not want its AI technology to be allowed for use in either mass surveillance or human-free autonomous weapons. A redhead on the terminal. The company says it hopes the Defense Department will reconsider.
And Joe, we want to get reaction to this breaking news as we turn to our political panel. Here with me in our Washington bureau, Arshi Siddiqui, Democratic strategist and founder and CEO of Bellwether Government Affairs, alongside Republican strategist Annalise Keller, partner at 7 Letter. Welcome to you both, and we do have much more we want to discuss with you. But on this idea around Anthropic and the DOD, we have seen Democratic senators mostly, Arshi, talking about how this is effectively, in the words of Raphael Warnock, the Democratic senator from Georgia, the Pentagon trying to blackmail a private company. I wonder if you see it that way and what example you think it sets if Anthropic does not acquiesce.
Well, I think it's leadership on Anthropic's part in the sense that we're in uncharted waters. this technology is still developing, and had Anthropic not taken the stance, it would have been a race to the bottom. Because this isn't just about Anthropic, this is about other companies as well, where they might be then forced to this race to the bottom, where everybody is trying to get this DoD work and not having any sort of guardrail. So from my perspective, I think Democrats are going to see this as true leadership.
Annalise, what's going on here? Anthropic says it'll help the DoD if it chooses to use another provider. Should it expect to have its technology unplugged, essentially, from servers at the DoD and beyond? Because if it is deemed a supply chain risk, every company from Boeing to Lockheed is going to have to eliminate all technology from this company.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a response yet from the DoD, so I think it's a little bit too early to say whether or not Anthropic will, not be going forward with the DoD. But certainly that's the way that it looks right now. They're clearly making a stand that they're not comfortable with the DoD's seeming, not giving enough safeguards around some of this surveillance issue that they're very concerned about. So, I think we'll have to wait to see how the DoD responds. But they, typically with Hegseth, I would expect a lot of sharp elbows in response. That's typically how they play these types of things. I think we'll all just sort of be watching to see how Hegseth and the DoD respond to see how this goes forward.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we have this piece of breaking news we're dealing with this evening, but I want to bring another piece of breaking news to our audience here on Bloomberg TV and radio pertaining to the saga we're seeing between Netflix, Paramount, and the assets Warner Brothers Discovery. Netflix is declining to raise its offer for Warner Brothers, which, of course, had declared Paramount's offer the superior deal. Netflix said a deal with Warner Brothers Discovery would have created holder value, but is no longer financially attractive. We are seeing a market reaction to this in the post-market. Netflix shares soaring about 10%. Paramount Skydance is getting a bid as well, up about 4%. It's worth noting that the Netflix co-CEO, Ted Sarandos, was just at the White House this afternoon, and now Netflix is taking this position, making me wonder what exactly was the conversation inside the White House. And Archie, this also comes after David Ellison was a guest of Senator Lindsey Graham at the State of the Union on Tuesday. Usually this would be a story we focus on from a business perspective, but it actually has become quite a political one as well.
Absolutely. And there have been a lot of twists and turns, and I wouldn't foreclose a few more. So I think this is something that's going to continue to develop. It's, I think, quintessential Trump in terms of keeping everybody guessing and trying to see where this goes.
Boy, Annalise, what do you think of this, to the point that Kayleigh is making? You've got Ellison in the front row at the State of the Union, Sarandos in the Oval Office today. Was this Donald Trump's decision? And if it wasn't, do these companies need to make that clear?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's Donald Trump's direct decision, but I think Archie's right. He does like to involve himself in these things in, a very loud way. And I do think it would be beneficial for, CEOs and companies to clarify, how they're talking about this with the administration and with lawmakers and make that distinction clear. I do think that's important.
Yeah, and Joe, it's remarkable to consider this because obviously we are having a much wider conversation actively in this country right now about the administration and various regulators that are part of this administration, including, for example, the FCC and its relationship specifically with media. And yes, we're talking about a massive archive of movies and various shows as well, but there is a media element as well here, which is something that when we're thinking about from a journalistic standpoint could have major consequences.
You talk about CNN, Kayleigh. It's a big one. The president was asked about it in the Oval Office just a couple of weeks ago. And again on Air Force One, remember what he said? It should be sold. He wants it to have a new ownership. And when you consider the potential ball and chain that this could have been for Netflix, and I know that there's a big argument in the media world about what that would mean for the company. Netflix is flying right now. It's up 12% in almost a relief rally, knowing that the company won't have to endure this.
Yeah, we are seeing definitely a massive move after hours. Right now, Netflix is up about 10 percentage points, but I would imagine this is going to be a big narrative when we begin the trading day tomorrow. I would note, as we continue to contend with this breaking news here, which again is that Netflix is not raising its offer for Warner Brothers Discovery. It seems that they no longer think this deal is attractive. Ted Sarandos, the Netflix co-CEO, was not the only person who was at the White House today meeting with President Trump. We also saw the mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, there, someone who President Trump on Tuesday called a communist. How are these two still so buddy-buddy, Archie? I'm a little confused. Is this a good look for Mamdani?
I think in many ways they understand each other, and they're two sides of the same coin, and so it's an interesting dynamic because we saw it earlier, and we saw a very similar shot on this meeting too. Also, New York and the federal government, there is a very big nexus point there, so they do have to work together. So I think in this day and age, communication is always good, and we see more and more there's less communications between the two parties. So I think from that perspective, it's a very positive piece.
I want to talk about Texas before we wrap things up with both of you. Obviously, this is the first major salvo in the primary trail campaign, the midterm trail, I should say, primary voting on Tuesday in Texas and in North Carolina. Texas is huge. And certainly when you talk about the Senate race there, Archie, there are very different politics in the primary race than are going to be presented in the general. And I'm wondering how you're looking at this potential for a Jasmine Crockett win, knowing that she may well be facing Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Listen, Joe, I mean, this is an interesting piece because, as you know, Texas has always been the white whale for Democrats. And every cycle, there's always this hope, great hope. I think what's really stunning and amazing about this race is that we have two great candidates that have really, I think, taken hold in terms of good campaigns, lots of excitement. 52% of Texans, they feel as if Texas is going in the wrong direction. So from that perspective, I think this is good. Also, the numbers are a little unclear. 20% of these voters that are showing up in early voting, they're non-primary voters. So what does that exactly mean? So I think this, and some of these polls are a little old. So I think there are a lot of moving parts here that will have to settle quickly.
Well, and what about for the Republicans, Annalise? President Trump's going to be there with the multiple Republican candidates having endorsed none of them. What does that do to the dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, he wants to stay out of it. I think he wants to see, obviously, just as a reminder, in Texas, you have to get over 50% in order to make it. So there's three candidates in order to be the primary candidate, rather. So there's three candidates there now. You have Cornyn, Paxton, and Wesley Hunt. So someone has to rise to the top. And I think once that happens, we need to watch and see what Trump does. It's likely to be Paxton and Cornyn. But look, Paxton has a real shot. I mean, he's surging right now, and Cornyn and a lot of Republicans in Washington are spending a lot of money to try and turn the tide to get Cornyn to be the nominee, to be the primary nominee, because they feel like he's going to have a better shot statewide. He's won statewide, been in office for years and years. So, you know, that's the dynamic that Trump's grappling with. And he has allegiances to Paxton as well. So he feels like he's, you know, not going to upset the apple cart and endorse Cornyn over his longstanding relationship with Paxton. So he's in a bit of a tough spot.
Tuesday is going to be something. Archie Siddiqui and Annalise Keller, we thank you. We'll be reading the tea leaves next week, reminding you of our breaking story. We're watching shares of Netflix in the after hours after it dropped out of the fight to buy Warner Brothers. Paramount's latest offer, $31 a share. And Kaylee, that was too much. Netflix says the deal is no longer financially attractive.
Yep, and we're seeing Paramount shares higher in the post market as well. This is a story that we will continue to follow on Bloomberg. So stick with Bloomberg for coverage on both TV and radio.